What happens at laser tag never stays at laser tag.
Laser Unfocused Tag Talk.
Laser Unfocused Tag Talk.
I feel like you could be like in Ghostbusters or something.
Oh my God, you have got some stories.
Let's talk about laser tag.
Who knew you were a laser tag legend?
Time to get laser unfocused. Tag Talk with Tivia.
Welcome to Laser Unfocused Tag Talk. Hi, I'm Tivia. Today we talk tips, tricks, and tag with George Raptis, owner of Skyway Laser Storm, who shares his knowledge from years of playing and operating with Laser Storm. So my guest today is George Raptis, and he's the owner of Skyway Laser Storm. And I appreciate you taking some time to talk Storm with me, George. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Now, let's start at the very beginning with your experience. When and where did you start playing laser tag?
Well, I started playing in Jester's Court, which is an arena in my home city of Warren, Ohio. It opened in '96, and I started playing in '96. And I started working there probably 6 months later. We figured out there were tournaments for Laser Storm, so we started playing in tournaments. And I became a manager there, but it ended up closing in 2006. So a few years later, the guy that owned that also owned the Skyway Drive-In property that current place. And there was this big red building there, and I asked him, "Hey, do you mind if I take that equipment and just try to make something work?" And that's what this turned into. It originally was supposed to be like just an arena, 2,000 square foot arena for us to play in, us and my teammates and my friends, and it just kind of grew into the business that it is today.
Very nice. So your first laser tag was Laser Storm.
Yes.
And so would you say that that's kind of like your first love? You've tried other tags, but is that what you always come back to?
Yeah, so I started playing Storm in '96, and then we started playing the Armageddon tournaments when they started in 2000. So that's when I was kind of introduced to all the different systems and all the different ways to play. But Storm was my first, and so that's the one that I like the most.
All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about Laser Storm. And what would you say makes it a really unique system?
Well, the major thing that makes it unique is we play on divided arenas. So the entire arena is split in half by a 3-foot tall dividing line that the players can't cross. So I don't think I've seen other systems that use that same format. So that's the thing that makes it really unique. Other unique aspects of it are the headset that we use. There's a lot of tactical gear that now uses headbands that go around your head. But this was, as far as I know, one of the only ones that had a headset. You had the original Photon that had the helmet, so it was similar to that. But compared to all the systems that were out when Storm became big, it's the one that had that headset sensor. And it doesn't have any body sensor. Some of the newer versions have a chest sensor, but my version doesn't have chest, shoulders, back, anything like that. It has the headset and the phaser down the barrel of the gun.
The divided arena really is probably one of the most unique features. And what is the purpose of having a divided arena? And could you maybe even describe it for somebody who's never seen one?
Yeah, sure. So it's not like split down straight down the middle. We make it intertwined so you can get behind the other team, shoot them from the side, and get behind them. But the thing that makes it unique is you can't chase people in the system. So you can prevent them from coming upon you. You can stay back and stay behind barriers and shoot them when they're coming at you, but you can't chase them through the arena. You can't gang up on somebody. It keeps them separated like that. And it also allows for more of what I call position-based play, where, different parts of the arena have stronger barriers or weaker barriers and places that you want to, get to have a good view of the entire team. And so when you're fighting the other team, you're fighting for control of those positions. So you attack a position, you get to it, and you can hit everybody on the other team, and the other team's trying to get you out of there so they can get their footing back and take the different positions they have for their scrimmage.
One of the things that I've found interesting about Storm, because I've played at a number of locations and you never see the same arena twice, because a lot of times the barriers are hanging from the ceiling or can be repositionable. So maybe you could talk to me a little bit about, you're talking about strong positions, but how do you build an arena so it is divided and using those materials?
Yeah, that takes a lot of experience. We've been doing it for so long that, I've designed many, many arenas, and a lot of them for charity, and it's just getting to know what kind of barrier positions and designs work over time I think you should know, what would make for a good playing arena. When we first started playing years and years ago, when we went to Pittsburgh, they used to have tall barriers in the back of the arena that you could just, what we call Wilson, just shoot over, and it was very hard to hit you if you're tall enough. And so the game play back then tended to be very slow, because if you can't get an angle on somebody like that, then you have to avoid them. So you either battle them straight up, try to shoot each other in phaser, or you avoid them and try to take other positions. It made the game very slow. And a lot of arenas were like that. A lot of arenas in Michigan, in Colorado, and our arena was also like that. So you had games that you would score, the end game could be 8 points on one team and 10 points on the other. Whereas now it can easily break over 100 points per game. So we tend to favor arenas that don't give any one position too much strength. You want to have a good balance so that you go to a middle part, and this barrier is strong because it can see half the arena here, but they can get up on the side and shoot you while you're shooting that way. You can defend yourself, sure, but in order to do that, you have to take yourself out of the game and face this way instead of using that barrier to its full potential. So it's a balance of the strength of the barrier, how easy it is to get behind and hit them, and different factors like that.
Now, some terminology, I'm going to get back to Wilsoning in a minute, but some terminology around that. Nerfing and buffing an arena. How does that come into play with Storm?
I think I used that. I want to nerf the house for the last tournament that you attended. I don't use that term often. I just decided to use it for that because the arena I had up until the last tournament had a position in it that was very strong. You could energize from your side of the arena, get all the way up to the enemy's side without crossing it, and be in a position where you couldn't be hit from behind. So you're standing there looking at the enemy while they're coming out and just shooting them as they come out. And that can work. We've played a tournament with that before. But if you have a draft tournament where there's a mix of very experienced players and some newer ones, that kind of spot can be a little too powerful, where one experienced player can go and basically make it not fun because you can't even walk out to get them out unless you have years of experience to do that. So what we want to do is we take a spot like that, and it was as simple as removing the back barrier. So when you go up there, you can now be hit from behind. So you can't just stand there and shoot one way and wait for the opponent to come to you. You have to do that and look behind you and keep checking everywhere. And eventually somebody's going to come up and get you.
I've got to say, I was hearing that terminology used for the first time by your kids. So actually it was interesting, to find out how they perceived what that was. So basically strengthening or weakening a position so that it's a little bit more of a fair advantage for all involved, it sounds like.
Right.
Okay, so terminology. Let's get back to something you just mentioned, Wilsoning. Could you tell me a little bit about that? And when you hear it, it's sort of self-explanatory, but if you've never heard it before, what is Wilsoning?
So it's the headset that you wear in Laser Storm. And the sensors for this are right up here. It's above the ear. The two little bulbs right here on the front and two in the back. So when you're behind a barrier, if you're looking just over it and you're behind a barrier, the opposing player can barely see your heads. And that's the point. You can look over the barrier and use your phaser to shoot. So if the barrier is here, you're shooting as you bring your phaser up. Now, the opponent can hit you because if they jump up high, they can do that. It's risky because you can hit them when they're doing it. And they can also hit you down the barrel of the phaser. And the reason that this gameplay works for us so well is because the phaser is so incredibly sensitive. There's actually two sensors, one on each side of the barrel, and they're behind the lenses. So right where if you can shoot somebody, they can shoot you. And this is actually an easier target to hit than the phaser, at least for experienced players. So that's what makes, in many other systems, if you sit behind a barrier and you do what I'm talking about, that basically makes you unhittable because it's not as easy to hit down the barrel of the gun. But because this is so easy to hit, that makes this style of gameplay usable in our format. Now, the gun may be easy to hit, but that doesn't mean the player with the gun would be easy to hit. Because my goal is to bring it up and shoot quicker than you can shoot me down my barrel. So that's what we call Wilsoning, but I think that was a local term to us in Pittsburgh. In Michigan, they called it webbing after the guy who invented it up there. In Colorado, they just called it sniping. So, we all had different terms for it, but it was basically the same anywhere you went.
Wilsoning, I was really made aware of an age gap when I used that term, and the younger players didn't know where it came from. So you and I know, where does Wilson come from?
Right. So that was from a TV show called Home Improvement, where the neighbor was always behind the fence and you only ever saw the top of his head. So that's why we called it that.
And you get around the Wilson and you get more power. But I'm both.
Yes. If you can jump on them or you can out Wilson them, get behind them. Yes.
All right. So there was recently a draft tournament held at your arena, and I heard a lot of positive comments about that format because it really allowed for some people who were not really super experienced with Storm to come in and learn a few things. And so I'm hoping that maybe you could expand upon that and kind of give us some tips and tricks. And what advice would you give, first of all, just to a new player starting out with Laser Storm?
A new player starting out with Laser Storm or laser tag in general? Because there's a difference.
Well, there is a difference, and I'm actually gonna ask you both. Laser Storm, let's start with, and then laser tag in general.
Okay, so if you've never played any type of laser tag before, and you just want, and your first time is playing Storm, then the basics are going to be, your stance pretty much is how you hold the phaser and how you shoot. I hold mine with my thumb pushing the trigger and my thumb resting against my cheek. The only thing this does is make sure that wherever I'm looking is where I'm aiming. So when I react, if I see somebody over there and I turn to look, I'm already aiming right there. So I can just pull the trigger and shoot that way. So that's like, and I can't overstate enough how much you need to shoot in the gun, because a lot of people will, especially, birthday parties or new players off the streets, a lot of them have fun playing, but some of them get frustrated. And their frustration comes when somebody's in the far back corner of the arena and what they call camping, just shooting there, sitting there, shooting everybody and not taking a hit. And that's what makes the gun so important, because if they can shoot you, you can shoot them. You have to be, your timing has to be good. You have to wait for them to stop firing or whatever. But just because they're camping back there doesn't mean you can't still hit them.
What about for laser tag just in general?
So the problem with Laser Storm as compared to some of these other systems is some of the skills you learn from playing these other systems actually work against you playing Laser Storm. As an example, something like Laser Quest, where you have a shoulders, front and back, and gun sensor. And a lot of that is around individual play. So you're playing somebody in the open, maybe behind a barrier, maybe not, but you're moving your gun around very quickly to try to shoot them. And your goal is to make your sensors harder to hit. So anything you do to make your sensors harder to hit by moving your body or getting out of the way doesn't work as well in Storm because it's on your head. So if you try to shake your head, it makes it much harder to aim your gun and to shoot at the opponent if you're trying to do something like that. So inevitably, when we're playing Armageddon and there's players that have never played Storm before, and they go in there, and if they don't talk to anybody, they just try to figure out on their own, you see them trying to shake their head around really hard, and it might work. I'm sitting there and I have a harder time shooting you, but you're certainly not shooting me because you can't aim at me like that. So that's one of the harder things to get used to for players that are from a different system. And also the fact that we play behind barriers so much. In many of the systems, there's just a massive amount of dogfighting where you're standing right next to somebody and moving around and trying to get a better shot on them. And we just don't do that as much here because the way the timing works on the packs, it's pretty much, as soon as you shoot somebody, they die. And we don't have multiple lives where they can come up and you can fight each other. You have to go back and energize. It's a one-shot type game that we play for tournaments. So you go out, you get hit, you come back and energize. So we don't do a lot of dogfighting that everybody else does. Instead, we stay behind a barrier, choose our positions, and figure out as a team how we can get control of a majority of the arena to try to keep them from attacking our base and to give our base runners cover to get more points that way.
With the limited number of sensors involved with Laser Storm, you were describing how you hold your phaser up by your face, but do you have to be aware of anything as far as not blocking any headset sensors in the process?
Yeah, we have rules against covering, so you're not allowed to cover your sensors with a body part. So you can be behind a barrier, using the barrier to cover your gun, so that you can pull it out and shoot, or just let one barrel out to shoot that way. You can't use your hands, but you can use barriers for that. But as far as blocking other shots with your body, you do have to be aware of it. It doesn't come up as much or as often because just of the way we play. But if you get into a position, normal standing position is fine. So if I'm like this, and if somebody on the 3-foot line, so they're below me, shooting at my arm, that would prevent them from hitting my headset. I don't even know if I play the way they would block them. But it's not on me to move my arm if I'm in a natural firing position. It's on them to stand up and shoot me. But at the same time, if I'm behind a barrier, if there's a barrier here and I want to get a low angle and I keep going down, now my entire back or whatever is blocking somebody from back there from hitting me, they can, a ref can call me for covering on that. So it's about natural firing position and whether or not you're aware of being shot. You don't have to be aware of it, but kind of the unspoken, the rule that we had before was as soon as that second shot hits a body part that should have otherwise hit a sensor, we make the call. It can be called on the first shot, but I tend to give that courtesy because when I'm playing, if I see somebody shooting at me, if for some reason I'm playing and my arm goes up and I notice somebody firing me, I'm going to drop it down and then turn. So if I get called for that, I do, but I tend to extend that courtesy to the players.
Coming from other more traditional laser tag systems, I don't find having the phaser at my head to be a natural firing position, but in Storm you would. It sounds like.
Especially it's a very light phaser. It's much smaller than most of the other systems out there. It's probably the lightest that I've seen out there. So being so light and being a thumb trigger, that probably has a lot to do with it too, because a trigger pull with your index finger it would definitely be different. But because this is just a very light button press, and you use your thumb, it makes this a very natural position. And most of the regulars that play, most tournament players have that position.
Does accuracy count for scoring in any way, or can you just keep on firing and firing until you hit something?
It doesn't count for your team score. So the team score is very basic. I know a lot of the other systems will just take everybody's personal score and add them together to get the final team score. But we don't do that in Storm. In Storm, we do have a personal score, but we don't pay attention to it because what matters in the game is the team score. And that is 1 point for a player hit and 5 points for a pod hit, a base hit. So accuracy does not factor into that. It'll factor into your personal score, but like I said, we don't really pay attention to that. And it can matter like for gameplay, because there's a few players that just pull the trigger constantly. You've got 255 shots on the clip. That's the max size that you can have. And when you run out of shots, you have to go energize. You don't lose a point or anything, but it takes you out of the game. You lose your position as you go and energize and have to get there again. So especially if you're playing a forward position, you don't want to necessarily go through your clip that quickly. And also, it shows people where you are. If you're firing continuously, and you're the type of player that sneaks around a little bit, that's going to work against you. So no, there's no score penalty for firing a lot. There can be some tactical ones depending on your playing style.
It's interesting that tidbit that you just threw out about 256 shots to your clip, because I have never gotten to the point of getting anywhere near emptying out 256 before I had to energize.
Right. It was much more common back before, like when I said we had, games that would score 8 or 10 points the whole time. That means that you're not energizing very often, so you're going through your clip much quicker. And if you're playing in a very defensive position, maybe back in the base, and then in a bigger arena like Pittsburgh has, where you might not see a lot of action, it can happen a little bit more frequently. But if you're energizing, going out and trying to take position aggressively, it tends not to happen too much.
256 seems like kind of a random number. Does that correlate to anything?
It does. It's the number of bits it takes to record the number of shots. So in the memory in the pack, it's stored in zeros and ones, and there's 8 bits that it stores it in. So you got 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 256. That's what it is.
Oh, that's interesting. Now, having played a few times, my score has varied tremendously, and I've never really been 100% clear on how the score is calculated, because I know there's a few different factors. You explained, obviously, the points that go into a team score, but when it's an individual player score, how are those points calculated? And I know that there's some experience level adjusting going on. Could you talk a little about that?
Actually, in my store, I run a custom version of the software, so it doesn't take into account that skill level calculation. And I do that because once players started getting to a higher skill level, the scores became kind of ridiculous. Where the higher level players, you get, I think, 1,000 points just for starting the game, and they would come out of the game with 1,001 points because they're getting like no points for hitting anybody. So I took that out of the equation so that when you see your player score, it's based on how you did in the game. And I don't know all the exact numbers. I could look it up, but I think it's 200 points you get for tagging a player, and you lose, I think, 100 points for getting tagged. You get 500 points for tagging a base. You get an accuracy bonus, and there might be a few other factors, but I would have to look those up.
So you can go negative in Storm then.
You can. It's not something I see often, mostly because you get a lot more points, I think it's 200 for giving a hit, but you might lose less than 100 for taking it. I would have to look it up. I don't see it happen very often, but it did happen when player skill levels were really high, and you saw that league scoring, handicapping was on. You would see it happen then, but outside of that, I don't recall seeing negative scores at my place.
So at your recent tournament, I heard some people talking about the benefits of signing in versus not because of the experience level. So that doesn't come into play where you are because you've got this custom system, but would that still be a factor at other Laser Storm sites?
At other Laser Storms that are using the membership software, your personal score will be affected by your skill level. I still have skill levels here at my store. It just doesn't affect your personal score. There's a handicapping involved where I don't know exactly how it works with the score, but for skill levels, you need 25 times your current level to get to the next level. So if you're on level 1, you need 25 points. If you're on level 2, you need 50 points. And to get skill points, you hit other players. But where it gets really funky is there's a difference depending on the level of the player that you hit. So if you're on level 1 and I'm on level 10 and you hit me, you get 10 points. So you hit me 3 times, you're already on level 2. But if I hit you, I get 1/10 of a point. So somebody like Red Dog from Pittsburgh, who's over level 100, he gets 1/100th of a point for hitting somebody that just started playing. So in a single game, he'd have to hit 100 players to get 1 skill level point, and he needs 2,500 or so to go to the next level. So, and the score works kind of the same. That's why at his place, if he's carded in, he might come out of that game with 1,000 points, and that's about it, because he's getting such a tiny fraction of a point for hitting somebody that it doesn't really affect the score.
Does that come into play typically during normal tournaments?
No, because like I said, we don't pay attention to the player scores. It's not something we even track because it's useless for the results of the games. And when we're looking at individual player stats, we're looking at how many hits they gave and they took and what their ratio was, their given minus their taken. That's what we care about. So that's what we track and we look for. The score doesn't mean too much to us, so we really don't keep track of it.
Gotcha. So there aren't a whole lot of individual bragging rights, it sounds like.
No, you have it, but not on the score. You have it for the ratio. So the most hits given and the ratio get the most accolades, and highest accuracy, least hits taken, I think, are the big ones, most pod hits. So those are the ones we have individual awards for, and like nationals and things like that.
Very cool. Now, as we were talking about with the draft tournament format, there was a lot of good advice being given from experienced players to less experienced players. And some suggestions that I had heard were involving things like not popping up in the same place, which is just kind of, good advice in laser tag in general.
Right.
But, what are your thoughts about that and holding a position, but not necessarily being in the same spot all the time?
Right. So one of the consequences of playing a game like Storm, where the position matters so much, is that the good positions are being watched. So if you get to your place, get to a place that's a good position, you peek out the side, there's a good chance somebody's already firing at you. They're waiting for you to pop your head out. So if you can vary, your height, move around a little bit, use the other side of the barrier or something so that they're not anticipating it, will help you out. Like I said earlier, most players play like this. But years ago, my sister was playing the game, but she didn't play like that. I don't know if you can see me, but she held it down by her waist, kind of like you can see in Zone or a few other systems like that. The consequence of that was because all the Storm players are so used to seeing this that when she put it down like that and fired at people, I would be in games repping and watching players split the difference in their mind and shoot in the center. They weren't shooting at the headset or the gun; they were missing, but they were going in between both. So that's a good, way to throw people off. Left-handed players do really good in here because we don't have many of them. And when one comes, they're shooting off of the side of barriers that you're not expecting, you tend to get a lot of good shots that way. So change it up. Do something that the other player's not expecting. Often helps quite a bit.
When you talk about, shooting from the hip, quite literally in this case, how do you zero in on where you're aiming? For example, one player was suggesting that it might be helpful to aim the red visible beam towards an opponent's face so that the invisible beam lines up a little bit better with the headset. Would you agree with that, or do you have some other tips along those lines?
Yeah, it kind of depends on where you are. So the Storm Phaser, the right side from my side, so your left side, is the invisible beam. That's the kill shot. And the other barrel is the red light, which does nothing. It just is the beam. But unlike other systems, we don't use a laser. We use a red LED, which matches the size of the infrared LED. So the red beam that comes out is going to be the same size and angle, and it gets larger over distance. It's the same size as the infrared beam. So you can use that to your advantage because the red light that you see is basically your kill shot. The one bad thing about it, though, is they are separated by the barrels. So the closer you are to somebody, the more you have to kind of adjust for that. Since the infrared light is coming out a little bit more to the right, you might have to shoot a little bit more to your left. That only really applies if you're really close to somebody, because over distance, the beam spreads, and once you're 5-10 feet away, it doesn't really matter.
When you're that far away, does splitting the difference by shooting at the center pack, is that effective as far as hitting either the hip or the headset?
Yes, so the beam does spread, but it doesn't spread that much. So if you shoot all the way across the arena, which mine I think is 45 feet on the short side, 60 feet on the long side, the beam will spread. So it starts off, less than an inch from the barrel in diameter. But when it gets all the way to the other side, it might only be this big. You might be a foot in diameter, which then, it wouldn't matter for shooting the headset. But if you're talking about the distance between here and here, it probably doesn't matter as much if you're up close, but it still can matter.
Well, I definitely felt like having the experience of playing with more experienced players was beneficial to kind of learning a lot of skills, and I got a lot of that feedback. Is there anything else you can suggest as far as just from a teaching perspective, how to play better Storm?
How to play better Storm. I struggle with this all the time because I don't think that I give the greatest advice when I'm trying to explain to newer players how to do it outside of everything that I just mentioned. It's so much more about hiding behind barriers and shooting at people when they come out across, when they come out to try to get to another position. So your best bet is to try to sit down with an arena map and try to figure out, okay, where are the strong spots going to be? And you don't have to do that with a map. You can play a game and see where the other team was the whole time. Like, all right, they were in this area and they really kicked our butts. How do we stop them from getting in this area? And when they do get in that area, how do we get them out? And a lot of it might be, using teamwork. So you'll have, if they can be hit from the back, but they're very good players, so they're going to be able to shoot either side. Well, one of your teammates should come over to the right side and peek out, but not so much that you can hit them. But if they know you're there, they can't turn their back to protect themselves, because the moment they turn their back, you can step out and shoot them. So your teammate needs to know that the person is there, and your strategy is to distract them on one side and attack them on the other. So it's about figuring out where their strong positions are, figuring out what you do when somebody gets there, and how to keep them out of there if you can. So there's many times where you'll have a position that it's useless for most of the arena, and all you can do is look at this little spot in the arena. But that spot is so powerful. If you can keep them out of there, even though you're barely giving any hits during the game, but you can keep them out of that position, the rest of your team can be more effective in doing what they're trying to do because of what you did. I played a Nationals once years ago where the pod runner on the other team was outrageously good. He could time it so well that in the practice rounds leading up to the main event, we tried all 5 of us, because it's a 5-on-5 game, all 5 of us trying to keep him out. We couldn't do it. He could still get through all 5 of us and hit the pod. But what we figured out was if I attack him from the other side, which was a very weak position to be in, but I distracted him enough that he had to turn his head to look at me and he couldn't time the pod as effectively. So even though me playing that position meant I'm going to give few hits and take a lot, I'm going to go down 20, 30 points in the game, but it prevented him from doing what he could do, and the rest of my team could make up those points and we ended up winning the tournament that way.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate having some guidance from your benefit of lots of experience, because it was actually requested. Some of the podcast followers, I've gotten feedback that they'd like to hear a little bit more along the lines of tips and tricks. But this whole podcast really kind of began as an opportunity to try and share some stories from the world of laser tag, and everybody has stories. So I'd like to kind of shift gears into that and ask you just a little bit about, kind of interesting things that you've seen or been a part of along the way. What are some of your best memories of playing laser tag, be it Laser Storm or any kind of laser tag?
Sure. Well, I mean, whenever you travel to a tournament, those tend to have some of the better stories, especially way back in the day when we were younger and maybe a lot less responsible than we are now, getting ourselves into situations that we really shouldn't be in. Traveling down to Armageddon, the first Armageddon in 2000 was in Texas, and that's a 20-hour drive from here. So we decided, okay, let's go. But being, I don't know, we were probably 18, 19 years old, still in school or early college and broke. We're not getting a hotel halfway through, so we're driving 20 hours straight there. So we do that, we find a hotel, and we're young kids, so a lot of us are drinking the whole time, and it was a lot of fun, but it was definitely irresponsible. And a lot of the stories that we have revolve around that. When we had Nationals in Kansas City, I forget what year, maybe 2002. There weren't many local players. There was like one local team, but the rest of the players were from all over the country. So Pittsburgh, California, Florida, Ohio, Michigan, everywhere. So we all coordinated and got the same hotel, which was probably a bad idea because it was the kind of hotel where you're on the second level, but it's a balcony. So everybody is outside the hotel room just having a good time. And those were some of the good stories where you have players getting themselves into a little bit of trouble. We were, saran wrapping other players' cars. We were, having prank wars on each other where we'd go into their hotel room when they weren't there and take their TV and hide it somewhere. Innocent stuff, but that was the fun stuff when you're traveling and you're a little too young to be doing it on your own.
So definitely lots of stories connected to Armageddon. Any other really funny or could never happen twice kind of stories? What other things have you experienced along your laser tag journey?
Oh, well, so many things, I guess. A lot of we had a national tournament in Florida where, again, we were younger and traveling down to Florida. We actually flew that time, but we rented a car, and I had my wife with me, and we were newlyweds. We were probably just a year or two into marriage, and so she came down with me, and we had a team of 5 players. Some of them you would know from Armageddon. I think Justin and Gumby and Cool Cat. But one of the times, I don't know why, but when we started driving, I'm sorry, I'm confusing my stories. We had a drive down to Texas, and Cool Cat was in the car, but we had all of our luggage on top of the car. And we're driving, just leaving Ohio, and a whole bunch of luggage comes flying off the roof rack. And Cool Cat sitting in the back of the car, and he looks back and say, "Our luggage flew off." And I said, "Oh no, we got to stop." And then he pauses for a second, looks back, he's like, "Wait, that's my luggage." I say, "Okay, that's fine. We can keep going." But we ended up getting pulled over, and I think we got a ticket for that too, because throwing our luggage all over the ground on the interstate wasn't a good thing.
What about in the arena itself? Any kind of cool stories that you can think of?
Cool stories in the arena. I got some tragic stories of people getting hurt.
Ooh.
But for cool stories, there was one. Yeah, there was one in an Armageddon where we were playing against. There was actually 2 storm teams in Armageddon, and we were playing against my friend Fat Tom. He was on the other team, and he was in Laser Quest. And I don't know where. It might have been Akron, maybe somewhere else. But I've been playing Quest for every Armageddon since 2000, so I know a little bit about it. I'm not very good at it, but I can get around the system. Fat Tom was newer to the system. So we go down on a ramp because it's tower lock, so you have to stay in a very small confined space with all these other players. I go down the ramp because you're allowed to do that, and he follows me. And I hit him a few times. He's getting frustrated, so I turn around and I start firing through some of the openings into the main play field. And I know he's about to come up, so just on a whim to be funny, I take my phaser and go behind me and fire once, and I hit him. And he just kind of paused. He didn't know what to say, so I turned around and I said, "Yeah, that just happened." And I don't think he could play the rest of the game. He was laughing too hard from that. So it was all in good fun, but it was just a very unique and funny experience.
Absolutely. There's a whole lot of funny stories. Whenever tag players get together, there's always stories, there's always cool experiences and memories. And
in the early games of Armageddon, when we were very bad at Laser Quest, and the Laser Quest teams were very good at it, there was a unique scoring system back then where just instead of the team score, you also had the opportunity to earn pity points by going positive, and they call kick-ass points by doubling the other team's score, things like that. So you kind of had to set up your strategy in different ways. So even if you knew you were going to lose, try to get at least 3 of your players to go positive, because that was the max you can get. So in Quest, and these guys were really good at it, we decided, hey, we want to get good enough that maybe we can't beat them, but we can hold our own against all the other players in Armageddon. So we walked into the arena for the first time, and I think it was against like Dark Angel or Blue Flame and a few others, Daydream, Fat Boy. And we stopped in the entrance, and they were going to walk around, but they turned around like, "What are you doing? Like, we want to play right here." And they're like, "You're crazy. We're going to destroy you." I'm like, yeah, we know, but we want to learn as quickly as possible, and we're going to do this. We just want you to tell us what we're doing wrong. And we did. I mean, they obviously destroyed us, but every single time they hit us, they said, "Okay, this is what you're doing wrong. You got to try this. You got to try this." They don't mind telling us because we're never going to beat them. You're never going to be good enough to beat a Laser Quest player on their home system unless you're actually playing it all the time. So we did that. We got beat down, and they're giving us little hints like, "Okay, you play Storm. What we're noticing is you're giving us this shoulder like crazy. Like, I don't know what you do in your system, but whatever it is making it easy to hit you with this shoulder. You have to turn, do something else." Just things like that we learned because we just went into there. Eventually became good friends with all these guys for doing things like that. We showed them how to play Storm as much as we could, and we just generally had good times in the arena doing things like that.
I think that's definitely one of the benefits to playing a cross-system kind of event like tournaments or like Armageddon, because you really do learn on systems that you would maybe very rarely have a chance to play or get experienced with, and yet playing with players of those calibers are really very cool experiences.
Yeah, and it's been, even now in these later years, I still learn more and more. In the beginning, when you would play a system like QZAR, all the QZAR players were showing us what they would do to be good at the game, which in that system, a lot of it has to do with how you cover, and because you're allowed to cover your sensors in QZAR. So they're showing us how they stand and how to hold it and what you should be doing. And we tried that at first, and we had some success because we're playing against other players that are trying to do the same thing. But as I age, and as that's becoming harder for me to understand what I'm doing, I realized that you have to spend a lot of time getting good at that for it to be even remotely effective. So in a situation like Armageddon, it's a lot more effective to just walk around and play the way you're comfortable playing against the players that are trying to do these covers and failing at it spectacularly. So you have a much easier time of doing it when they're trying to do something that they actually need years of practice to get good at. It actually works against them if they're just trying for this one small advantage.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely can see that. Any other thoughts to share about your career in laser tag?
Thoughts about my career? No, I've been playing since '96, like I said, so it's been getting close to 30 years now. I guess 26 years or so. And it's fascinating watching my kids play now because I have four, and the oldest one doesn't seem that interested. I've never like pushed on him. I didn't want him to, do it if he's not having a great time. But the twins, they seem to be all in it. And watching them get good and the questions that they ask and how they're playing, it's really fascinating to watch because a lot of the same things, when I was just learning how to play is when I went through, and seeing that from the start is really interesting and unique.
So Corbin and Abigail are twins?
Yeah, they are. They're both 12.
Oh, I did not know that.
Mm-hmm.
Your kids, sharp cookies. They were very, very good and very good at explaining different things at the tournament. So nice representation for you there.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun to watch them play, and I'm glad they're so helpful too. So they're helping out. They want other people to learn as much as them because they have fun. You have a lot of fun playing against people that you can compete against. If you're just playing against people that are new, okay, you can beat them in that game, but it's not. Ultimately, it's no fun. You want to play against people who are very good, if not better than you, so that you can get better. And that's where the fun is.
Absolutely. Well, George, I appreciate you sharing your insights and a little bit of your laser tag background. Could we wrap up with a little bit of rapid fire tag talk and throw some quick questions at you for some quick answers?
Sure.
All right. What is your favorite system besides Laser Storm?
Besides Laser Storm is probably Laser Force. I love playing the Space Marines format. That's probably my favorite system, maybe followed by Tron and Blast.
Very good. Favorite arena besides your own?
Favorite arena was probably a Laser Force arena I think it was Houston. It was like a 3-level arena that had like a ring around the first level and then this tiny third story. And it was just a lot of fun to play. You could have a lot of different and unique strategies on it, which we utilized when we played there.
Oh my goodness. Are you talking one in Sugarland?
I might be. That sounds familiar.
I played there too. I totally agree with you. That was a good one. Favorite tournament that you've played?
So usually my answer to that would have been 2001 Nationals at the old Jester's Court. But recently, I think it's the 2021 at my place, the Nationals there. And we did win that tournament, but it was because of who I played with, my teammates. And I didn't realize at the time, I hadn't realized that, but my teammate cautioned that he hadn't won Nationals before. So it was kind of special in that regard. And it's just really great being able to play at the higher levels with your teammates that have been playing as long as you. And that kind of makes it like my favorite tournament.
Very good. Best prize that you've ever won through laser tag?
Best prize? I always go back to the golden phaser I won from LTWC. It was just for Manager's Cup, so it wasn't like this big event, but I just like having a golden phaser. It's really cool.
Nice. Favorite place that you've traveled because of laser tag?
Because of laser tag would probably be the UK. I got to go and play that Armageddon the first year he hosted. I forget what year it was. But I got to go there. We were actually in Greece with my in-laws, and on the way back, we were stopping through the UK. Our layover was there. So I just decided to extend it for a few days, and we spent a day or two in London, but then went and met Mike at his place and just played the Armageddon there, which was, to me, a lot more fun than seeing the sights in the big cities. I'm used to that. I've done that a lot. But going to see the actual countryside and the people that live there and the locals like that and meeting them over a common thing like laser tag, that was really cool.
Nice. Coolest person that you've ever met through laser tag?
Oh, there's definitely a large number of them, but I think the one that the most unique that I like is Seatree from the UK. I remember when he first came here, I didn't meet him when I went there, I don't think. But when he was here, the first system we played was Laser Blast. and it was in Michigan. They have these tall barriers. And I just remember going around it. I might have been playing Storm, I don't remember, but I remember being shot from over top of it. And I'm like, wow, that must be, I don't know who can shoot over that. And then I look over and I see it's him. I'm like, wow, that is just impressive. He's just a cool person in general.
Definitely. Okay, now ending super important question. Favorite snack item at the concession stand?
At the Skyway?
Any concession stand.
At any concession stand?
Sure.
I would say the pierogies next door at the drive-in here.
I'll tell you, your Skyway concession stand, definitely top notch. They do a good job.
It is a movie theater concession stand. It's a little different than normal laser tag concessions.
Absolutely. But definitely nice to have right there. And definitely I can speak to having been at your arena a few times. You've got a great site, and I thank you for doing what you do. And I thank you for joining me for some Laser Unfocused Tag Talk. George Raptis, my guest.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, George.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for checking out this episode of Laser Unfocused Tag Talk. Listen for more episodes on the first and third Friday of each month. Want to be a guest on an upcoming episode? Find out more and follow my blog and website at TiviaChickLovesLaserTag.com.